Because if you go see a doctor and take your medicine, then you don't believe that God's really going to heal you, and that is the fastest way to lose your miracle of healing according to word faith theology. He had healing rooms. Bethel Church in Redding, California is known for this, having healing rooms. Well, he is the one who began these healing rooms. He lived in opulent luxury while his followers lived in poverty. He forced his followers to give to him basically all or most of their money. Many, many people died under his supposed care, including children. The newspaper reports of John Alexander Dowie are quite honestly shocking in their details. Dowie could rightly be called a murderer. He denied sick people basic medical treatment. In fact, there was one woman who was one of his followers, a lady named Anita Flanders, and she was dying of an illness, and as she was dying, she requested simply a bowl of broth, and he denied her a bowl of broth because the reason she was sick, you see, was her lack of faith. And so he withheld this broth from a dying woman. She died. Of course, the reason she died was her lack of faith, according to John Alexander Dowie. He was a forerunner of American Pentecostalism, the forerunner of the Pentecostal movement. According to the Sunday Inter-Ocean, Chicago, Illinois, 1899, they record this in their article. John Alexander Dowie says, and I quote, "Don't be stingy with your money. If you do, the Lord may be stingy with his cures. No better today, sir," Dowie would thunder at a debilitated cancer subject or a person with epilepsy. "Well, sir, if you are not better, it is your own fault. You either don't trust in the Lord or you are concealing some infamous crime." So if you're sick, it's your fault. It is standard doctrine in the vast majority of the charismatic movement, all of Word of Faith, that it is always God's will for you to be healed. Well, if it's always God's will for a person to be healed, and a person prays for that healing for days, weeks, months, years, some people for decades, and the healing does not come, then the question must be asked, whose fault is it? By definition, of course, it cannot be God's fault because he's perfect. So guess who's left? It's your fault. It's your lack of faith. It's your lack of giving. Maybe you're not even saved. John Alexander Dowie, however, died in 1907 from a massive stroke. And John Alexander Dowie claimed to be Elijah, claimed to be a reincarnation of the prophet Elijah. Frank Sanford, another one of God's generals, he was a native of Maine, went to a missions trip, performed an exorcism on one of his friends, and then went for a walk in the woods. And as he was walking in the woods, he heard a voice from heaven say, "Armageddon." If you're walking in the woods and you hear an audible voice from heaven saying Armageddon, ain't nothing good coming after that. He opened a religious compound named Shiloh, also referred to as the Kingdom and the Legion of God, which is a very interesting name, the Legion of God, given Mark chapter 5. Jesus asked the demoniac, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion, for we are many." That's a very interesting name. At his zenith, he had about 1,000 followers, and he forced, like John Alexander Dowie, he forced all of his followers to give him all of their possessions, and they were not allowed to leave this compound. He forced extended fasts upon his followers, including upon children. Sickness was a sign that your soul was sick, and even sick kids were forced to fast further to get right with God, and if they did not get right with God by their recovery, then they were physically beaten. He was a wicked, wicked man, as was John Alexander Dowie. One girl in his compound was punished for the sin of vanity. How did she display a sin of vanity? She was caught looking in a mirror. And so that's clearly the sin of vanity, and that child was beaten. Wicked. Many people died following him, including at least one child. He was actually arrested for manslaughter. And believe it or not, there are still, to this day, 6 of these Shiloh churches in existence. And they are now known as Kingdom Christian Ministries. I would assume they are not as extreme as he was back then, but who knows. And also, like John Alexander Dowie, Frank Sanford claimed to be Elijah. Charles Fox Parham. Charles Fox Parham. He was fascinated with Frank Sanford, spent time with him, learned a lot from him. He is widely regarded to be the father of the American Pentecostal movement, Charles Fox Parham. Parham taught that the Old Testament character Job suffered because he was living in sin. Had nothing to do with the sovereignty of God, of course. It was Job's fault. And many of today's modern faith preachers, they claim that the reason that Job suffered was because of his sin. He formed the Bethel Healing School. Does that sound familiar? Bethel Church, Redding, California. He had a healing school and school of prophecy. He held that preachers who do not preach, quote, the gospel of healing will face utter condemnation before God. You see, physical healing, according to Charles Fox Parham, was just as much an integral part of the gospel as was redemption and being saved from our sins. He derided Christians for going to doctors. You see a common theme here. Derided Christians for going to doctors. And quite honestly, he was a complete charlatan and fraud. He had a couple of different scams that he used to raise money, one of which was the Ark of the Covenant scam. He claimed to know the exact location of the Ark of the Covenant, and he got people to give him money to form an expedition to go to the Holy Land to find the Ark of the Covenant. He did this on 2 different occasions, raised a ton of money, and indeed went over to find the Ark of the Covenant. He claimed to have the exact location too, but obviously he didn't find it. Indiana Jones found it. He was involved in another scam, and he actually, believe it or not, this is real, but he claimed to have, or at least he was partnered with another guy who claimed to have a device that would turn rocks into gold. And of course, you could have your rocks turned into gold if you would just give him money to fund his scam. And Charles Fox Parham was actually arrested for sodomy back when such things were actually punishable crimes. Now we celebrate them, but back 100 years ago, not so much. So Charles Fox Parham, like John Alexander Dowie, like Frank Sanford, was an absolute scoundrel. But his Bethel School of Prophecy, oh, and by the way, Charles Fox Parham also claimed to be Elijah.